How to get along better with your in-laws this week. The table setting has come together beautifully, your home smells of freshly baked rolls, roasted turkey and everything seems to be going according to plan. But when the doorbell rings, you tense up a little bit, either subconsciously or fully aware of the dramatic showdown that could happen in your dining room over the next 3 hours. Somehow, despite the years of effort you've put into smoothing out those complicated in-law dynamics, sometimes bending over backward in the name of peace, the tension continues to surface at gatherings. While one could point to many reasons why in-law relationships are so notoriously difficult to manage, it really boils down to two primary issues: boundaries and expectations. Families can have rather strange boundaries, says a psychologist who specializes in relationships. When an in-law enters a new family situation, he or she inherits those boundaries and the problems associated with those boundaries, which can manifest in lots of ways. For example, a mother-in-law who makes herself at home in her son's kitchen, a father-in-law who gives unsolicited, or in-laws who use money to exert control over a couple. These boundaries are typically entrenched after a lifetime together, which means it's essentially impossible to reconfigure them, hence the struggle. Unmet expectations strain all relationships, but the stakes are high in in-law relationships because they are stakeholders in your marriage. Differing expectations for how to manage things, such as holiday plans, child rearing, visiting frequency, home presentation, and even work balance, can also contribute to a strained relationship. These unmet expectations, at either end, are a breeding ground for messy emotions, ranging from anger to frustration to sadness. Unmet expectations strain all relationships, but the stakes are high in in-law relationships because they are stakeholders in your marriage, and your children if you decide to have them, as well as your household and even issues like finances, says Dr. Durvasula. To help bridge the gap between differing expectations, make sure you and your partner are on the same page, especially on topics that are particularly contentious with your in-laws. A united front makes a huge difference, says Dr. Durvasula. You do not want to be figuring things out on the fly with your spouse while in the crosshairs of your in-laws. If you and your spouse are on the same page, then you can take the path of least resistance with in-laws and just smile politely and say sure, but then do things the way that you and your spouse believe is appropriate for your relationship. While many in-law relationship issues are the result of overstepping boundaries or not meeting expectations, sometimes other factors are at play. Stereotypically and often anecdotally, we see particularly embittered relationships between mother-in-law and her son or daughter-in-law. Jean, a 58-year-old from Indiana who is using her middle name and prefers not to disclose her first and last name for obvious reasons, told NBC News Better that she's been struggling to find a happy ground with her mother-in-law for 2 decades. One time, when the kids were little, I had dirty dishes in the sink and a pile of clean laundry dumped on the couch to be folded. My mother-in-law came in, looked at it, and said, "I don't know how people live like this." She didn't feel the least bit bad about how unfiltered that remark was or how bad it would make me feel, Wilson says. Also, her hostility, domineering ways and criticism were so hard to live with, when visiting her, that I'd be in tears the last couple of days. Wilson says that she's received comments from her mother-in-law expressing that she feels like she lost her son. Such feelings aren't so rare, according to a clinical psychologist with decades of experience dissecting familial stressors. A mother-in-law's often unconscious fears that her son has or will forsake her for his wife, preferring her family and her family holiday functions. A mother-in-law's often unconscious fears that her son has or will forsake her for his wife, preferring her family and her family holiday functions, thereby leaving less time, attention and care for his mother, she notes. In the face of a nitpicky mother-in-law who harbors such feelings, she says it's vital to remind yourself of your true nature and worth. We've also outlined some helpful tips below. There are some extreme outliers to consider in regard to complicated in-law relationships, as well. These include widely varying, and excessively vocal, ideologies, mental illness and substance abuse. Minimal, controlled contact is ideal here, though in dangerous situations it may be best to practice complete avoidance. A therapist can help you navigate this more strategically. In many cases, conflict is a two-way street. While you may not be able to smooth things over entirely, you can with your in-laws by starting with the below advice. Want more tips like these? NBC News Better is obsessed with finding easier, healthier and smarter ways to live. And follow us on,